All video games have an expiration date. That day can be a lot earlier than expected. For some reason, games with a lot of promise or excitement are gone too soon. Their causes of death are varied, and not of old age. Here are the stories of some games that shut down too early. Nothing lasts forever. The rhythm genre has a long and colorful history, but none of it ever appealed to me like Guitar Hero did. I started out playing alone, but Rock Band was a huge part of my life at the end of the 2000s. My friends and I already spent a lot of time driving around, doing nothing but karaoke in our cars, and we took it to another level by moving that to a giant basement TV. There's something magical about a bunch of friends wailing away on plastic and rubber instruments, howling Foreigner's Jukebox Hero at the top of their lungs. On January 24th, 2023, Epic Games, which acquired Harmonix in 2021, shut down servers for all games in the series except for Rock Band 4. That game is only available on PS4 and Xbox One. It's difficult to find the instrument peripherals. Players are still entitled to delisted songs they previously purchased, and can even buy new songs that are still in the store. But the clock is ticking, and pending the announcement of a solution, it will all go away when the servers for those two consoles are inevitably taken offline. Rock Band and similar games have faded from cultural relevance since the early 2010s. The possibility that this once extremely popular game becomes abandonware grows larger all of the time. Wikipedia indicates the most recent track DLC release, over a year ago now, was, poetically, Send Me On My Way by Rusted Root. 1 vs 100, an arcade game on the Xbox 360, was shut down by Microsoft after just 2 seasons. It's remembered fondly by the players who were there to experience it, so what happened? If you weren't around for it, the premise was this. A single contestant, called the One, competed against a group of 100 players called the Mob. If the One got a question right, the game continued, and mob members who were wrong were eliminated. If the One answered incorrectly, the game ended, and a prize of 10,000 Microsoft points was split up. Setting the game apart from the television show it was based on was the crowd, Xbox players that got to participate along with the main contestants. The top 3 in each game won an Xbox Live Arcade game. This massively multiplayer online experience was unique, a little quirky, and a lot of fun. It is a snapshot in time, a game that represents how a simple concept can find success at scale. Despite its popularity and early success, Microsoft announced in the summer of 2010 that it would not return. The idea had a revival in 2017 with HQ, a phone game with a similar premise.
Alright, you got it. Let's do it. Question 1. 4 of the 5 major sports in the US have what word in their name?
It persisted much longer than 1 vs 100, with live trivia games offered over the next 5 years. It never officially shut down, but the last game took place on November 17, 2022. Almost a year later, the app was taken off both the Apple and Google marketplaces. Trivia will always appeal to certain people, but an apparent difficulty in generating revenue might mean that a massive, online, live version may just be a fun experiment we remember post-mortem. Some games shut down because they don't have any subscribers. Usually, the subscription becomes too expensive and the price outweighs the value. But some things are free to subscribe to, like this channel. Go ahead, you know where the button is. Are you a racing game enthusiast? You might have been sad when Blur never got off the ground. It wasn't bad. In fact, it consistently rated well in contemporary reviews. So why did it fail? Unfortunately, some games are released at the worst possible time. Blur was a wacky blend of racing and vehicular combat, like Mario Kart but with real car models. It launched in 2010 on Xbox 360, PS3, and PC, and came from a pedigreed developer, Bizarre Creations, on the tail of their success in the Project Gotham Racing series. With a fun premise and a developer who knew what they were doing, Blur should have become a household name. Instead, it was painfully unlucky. A few short months after release, 2 of the most popular racing franchises of all time dropped new titles: Need for Speed Hot Pursuit and Gran Turismo 5. Less than a year after Blur came out, its Liverpool-based creator was closed by Activision. It meant the death of Blur itself. You can still find it secondhand, and there is a small, dedicated community that found their own solution for connectivity. Human beings are innately drawn to the unknown, of discovering the undiscovered. People all throughout history have looked for more and chased the evergreen idea that there's something just over the horizon. We name our cars things like Expedition, Ascent, and Challenger. The phenomenon actually crosses over into our media. Films that were dismissed or overlooked in their time are later rediscovered, becoming cult classics. It's devastating that this same sense of finding a hidden gem, a diamond in the rough, is impossible for many games that might have just been underappreciated in their time. No one will ever again play Blur and so many other games like it. They are now abandonware, ignored by the developer, no longer for sale, and with no official support. Unlike a great movie, it can never be discovered by first-time players. Back when the internet was still fresh and exciting, we used to play what were called Flash games. Initially made to facilitate interactive websites, Flash has a legendary reputation as the force behind browser games on early desktop computers. Sites like addictinggames.com and Newgrounds reached their peak in internet culture largely on the back of this technology. Ask anyone who grew up around that time, and they've at least heard of Robot Unicorn Attack, Bloons Tower Defense, and maybe Spank the Monkey. One of the first online games of this type I really got into was one of 3 hosted on a site called Gamer.tv. The other 2 are mostly lost media, fever dreams that have almost completely disappeared from the internet, a fun and quirky game called Oddballs Bowling, and an interesting turn and grid-based combat game called Voodoo. But my favorite was Dinky Bomb. There was a game lobby where players challenged each other, a ranking system, chat, and of course the game itself. Players each took turns firing weapons from their 3 dinkies until they blew up the other player's dinkies. There was a vibrant forum community, complete with clans. It's a beautiful time capsule into what it was like to play games in the era. So what happened to Flash games? Where did they come from, and why have they died out? In 1996, Future Splash Animator was sold to Macromedia, where it became known as Flash. 2 things happened in 2005. It was acquired by Adobe after a period of growth coinciding with more people getting online, and a small website implemented Flash to allow viewers to upload and share videos on the web. It went on to dominate internet video, and is known as YouTube. Dinky Bomb and Gamer.tv underwent dramatic changes. The game was moved to a new host, the forums closed, and the community migrated to a new site. By 2007, the game was sold to Atari. The company never used the intellectual property for anything, and it passed into obscurity with a whimper. Also in 2007, Apple released the first iPhone. Flash support never made it to the device because of performance issues. Its absence continued until 2010, when Steve Jobs threw the first shovelful of dirt on its coffin in a memo called Thoughts on Flash, where he explained why Apple was abandoning the software. The era of Flash games was coming to an end. Dinky Bomb itself faced a variety of different problems in its lifetime, but none of it ultimately mattered. It's unlikely to have survived the end of Flash anyway. Flash itself was discontinued by Adobe at the end of 2020, and Dinky Bomb is nowhere to be found anywhere. Of course, a clone could recreate it, but the original form is forever lost in time. Just a memory for the players who loved it. Occasionally, a game is abandoned and shut down completely because there is a fatal flaw, a crack in the foundation, that buckles under the weight of its own players. Playtesting can only reveal so much about a game before it gets into the hands of real people. Nosgoth got off to a poor start when it was revealed in 2013. It was a spin-off from the Legacy of Kain series, and fans were disappointed that it didn't continue in the series' path of single-player story gameplay. But that wasn't the biggest problem, or the biggest reason for why it was eventually taken offline. It is overly optimistic to think that any game design can be balanced given enough effort. The pursuit of fair gameplay is why some titles feature frequent updates to change in-game interactions and the math behind things like damage calculation and cooldown timers. Spend enough time around gamers, and it is inevitable that you'll hear, X champion or weapon is broken, but it's basically never true. The real problem is a balancing issue, and it can be addressed with some number adjustments. This is much harder to achieve in a game like Nosgoth. Instead of a single-player mode, the game was actually an asymmetrical online multiplayer action, with one team playing as vampires and the other as humans. The 2 sides were significantly different. While vampires could fly and climb, they were limited to melee attacks. Humans used weapons and were able to heal. Asymmetrical games are notoriously difficult to make fair for each side. Many games could be put in this category, depending on how you define them. MOBA games are inherently asymmetrical, but feature drafts and neutral objectives as a counterbalance. Counter-Strike and Valorant feature opposing sides that take turns trying to achieve the same objective. Super Smash Bros. And other fighting games leave room for skill expression in individual matchups. But games like Nosgoth and Evolve have zero margin for error in how they are built. If one side is always weaker than the other with players at higher skill levels, the game is destined for failure. In Nosgoth, coordinated human teams had little trouble stifling vampires because of the weapon disadvantage. Players can feel this contrast even if they can't or don't articulate it, and for many it will ruin the experience. For those who stick around long enough, this gap is made even worse when more casual players start to drop out, and only the more knowledgeable and dedicated players are left. The premise sounds fun, and it can be for a while, until the novelty wears off. But since the enjoyment is really based on the broken element of the game, it fades quickly. Nosgoth was in open beta from January 2015 until May 2016, when the game was officially shut down. Psyonix was already on to bigger and better things. A real tragedy occurs when a game is taken offline forever because the company who made it stops believing in it. It could be that their mistakes have added up. It might be that there was bad marketing, slow updates, poor design, or general mismanagement. Whatever factors go into it, the decision is made to pull the plug, regardless of what the fans might think. It might even mean the death of a beloved mascot. Enter LittleBigPlanet, and our victim, Sackboy. The first game in the series launched in 2008 for the PS3 with critical acclaim. A platformer, the biggest draw for the series, besides Sackboy, was player-generated content that could be shared online. This was true for all three main games in the series. The writing may have been on the wall already when LittleBigPlanet 3 came out over 10 years ago. Though still received positively, the trend in review scores was unmistakably downward. In early 2021, 7 years into its life, the servers experienced DDoS attacks. Sony took the opportunity to close down servers, and when they were restored, the PlayStation 3 ones were left permanently offline. DDoS attacks are never permanent unless they are actually a more sophisticated event called flashing, where hardware is bricked or firmware on a device or server is completely replaced. It seems incredibly unlikely that this is what happened to only the LittleBigPlanet 3 servers for PS3. Sony just chose to leave them dead. Last year, the PS4 servers were also taken down in an emergency after someone figured out how to get specific users banned from PlayStation Network through the game. It's unlikely that the remaining player population was substantial for such an old console game. There was still a community, of course, but even a dedicated group of marginal size wouldn't justify keeping the servers online indefinitely. Eventually, it was announced that they would remain offline permanently, euthanizing a once beloved game. Over 10 million community levels were lost. Someone in a suit somewhere made the decision not to resuscitate. LittleBigPlanet 3 was allowed to fade out forever, joining an ever-growing list of gaming experiences that we can never go back to. It was delisted in October 2024. You can get into the particulars of why a game gets shut down, but it can almost always be attributed to cash flow. The evolution of gaming as a shared online experience didn't come without drawbacks. Servers and their maintenance cost real money and aren't done as charity. The price we pay for playing with other people, anywhere and anytime, is that when our favorite games decline in popularity, they start to circle the drain. Barring some unexpected surge in interest in that terminal stage, we have to prepare to say goodbye. Normally, the end isn't handled in such a callous manner as that of LittleBigPlanet. Stories like the Noble 14 from Halo 2 aren't the norm either, but such a legendary and emotional farewell will resonate forever in gaming history. For many of us, the end of a game, whether it is too soon or not, is a period of mourning. We can only hope that we get the opportunity to give the classics a well-deserved send-off. If you love a game today that relies on connecting with other people online, know that it won't live forever. The longest living games won't always be there, even the ones that are still surviving now. Spread the word, get people interested, and bring people back. It's the only way to make sure that the experience will still be there tomorrow.